Welcome to another insightful and sometimes controversial episode of Ton's Two Cents podcast, T2C. Today's episode, Expectation versus Reality, debunks the truths and expectations of teaming with Alaskan Native companies and government contracting. I'm your host, Ton Wilson, and joining us today is Heather LaCroix from Shenanigans Kronos Operations, who is a fast talking and an even faster thinking friend and colleague. She is also my fellow co chair of FC International Small Business Committee, where now we're both the emeritus chairs of that subcommittee. Heather, thank you for sharing your expertise with our intellectuals today, and please tell them a little bit about yourself and your role at Kronos Operations.
Thanks for having me, Ton. Always a pleasure to get an opportunity to talk to you, and I love your intellectual group. So, I am Heather LaCroix, as Ton said. I'm the president of Cronus Operations, and I'm actually still the general manager of Chiniga Technical Innovations. I have been with Chiniga Corporation for 11 years now, and I'm in charge of running the business development and portfolio management for both of those companies.
And you were a Virginia expat like myself too, living in Colorado. It's all a blur to me out west.
And we're like boomerangs, so we're a military family, but I consider us like DC, Northern Virginia boomerangs. So no matter where we've ever been assigned, we always kind of float back to the national capital region. It's where our children consider home. You know, it's a very comfortable location for us. It's beautiful, lots of great friends and family there. And, for all the places we've lived in 13 different places in 23 years, but our life, started in the Army. And so I am a Army veteran. And when I got out, I was medically retired out of the military. And right at that time, that was right on the cusp of like 9/11. I was hurt and sending young soldiers off to war, on taskings, handling their families, doing all the things. And when I got out, my background and like passion, for serving our country didn't go away. And so I was really kind of tasked, like, what do I do? Or I can still continue to serve in a way that is meaningful to me. So when I first left the Army, I left what's now Fort Liberty and went to what's now Fort Cavazos. And my first job was with Electronic Warfare Associates. So I acted as an operations research analyst, supporting testing that went on for the Operational Test Command. It gave me a lot of insight, and I had a direct influence on testing the equipment, on helping make sure that all of the standards for acceptability criteria and functionality for meeting the needs of the warfighter. So I felt very involved, like I was giving to the soldiers and their families and still serving. After EWA, which was a fantastic company to work for, we got orders to go to the National Capital Region, and I worked for Booz Allen Hamilton for several years. That was a different, type of job, doing requirements management with the ORSA input. And that's really why I was asked to join that team, all about optimization and figuring out how can we best serve and develop software that's used for C4I systems in the military. Most of our clientele, we're doing testing at PEO Stry, JF Cullum, the National Simulation Center, Fort Cavazos, really all over the country. Again, still feel like I was making an impact. Took a couple of years off. A contract I was working on ended. It was a really great opportunity. Our youngest son at the time needed some additional help going to speech therapy, a lot of just things going on. And so for several years, I just focused on our home, raising our children. And then a couple of years into that, things were getting settled. We were stationed right outside Aberdeen Proving Ground. And I got this random phone call. It was an old coworker of mine from Booz Allen who had actually met while I was at Fort Cavazos supporting OTC. And it was a simple, hey, would you be interested in helping us? We have some programs coming up that could really use an operations research analyst mindset. And, at first I'm like, okay, what is this? Like, how does this all fit in? There's a lot going on. Let me understand more. But the reality was the programs I was asked to come on and support were direct end user interfaces. So I agreed. And we came up with a very great solution. That was my introduction to Chiniga. I was allowed to come in initially part-time as it worked in a very flexible way. I was on site, allowed to work hybrid to accomplish everything that we needed to do. And that just kind of took off. I was brought in to support different contracts that supported the Army, one for the Federal Trade Commission, and then started working with Air Force customers and the FBI, just really expanding it. Um, when I was at Chinego, what came abundantly clear are some of the opportunities I had from Booz Allen. What at Booz Allen, I was brought into business development. They had a lot of opportunities to say, hey, like, are you interested in learning how to do proposals and be part of these technical solutions and learn the art of proposal, which it really is an art to learn how to do that. I still remember the very first assignment I was asked to look at, and I responded like, this is terrible. Grade's awful. But I didn't even know what that was. I'm like, no, this is how you do it. And they're like, no, we're going to teach you how to actually, write to the response. So it's responsive, it'll grade well, and it's going to, be compliant and do well. So with Chiniga, those doors just kept opening. And it's been very fulfilling. The experience between a large company and a small company I prefer the small company. There's nothing wrong with big business. I just really enjoy the culture that I have within Chiniga. And I think beyond just having the small business, like my small business team I need to work with, there really is something to say about Chiniga Corporation. Last summer, I had the privilege to go to the Chiniga Village in Alaska. It was incredibly powerful. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's one thing you say in Anchorage, you're driving an hour to Whittier and then you're taking like a 4-hour ferry and you're getting off on a dock. And that's really where not all the villagers live there anymore, the descendants of Chiniga villagers, but there is a village and people live there. It's a pretty incredible story, but watching why we're doing the work outside of just the mission to our clients in the federal government, but really what those profits, what the efforts are going to support, it's very moving. Uh, it's,
Yeah.
reassuring to just an extra compliment as to why we're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, first of all, thank you for your service.
Yep.
And secondly, I think it's ingrained in those who do serve that afterwards they want to continue to serve and in whatever manner that might be. And I think that's just something that is inherent. That's kind of ingrained afterwards when you transition. And, it's funny that you say that you like working for a small business and yes, your company and different companies are. I don't think some of us think of Shenega as being, like a small business, just how large and how many companies and whatnot. And we're going to go into a lot of the
Right.
details so that our intellectuals really kind of understand not every ANC is created equal. And ANC for our listeners is Alaskan Native companies. And so we'll really kind of dive, like into that. And so let's just kind of cut to the chase. You and I just kind of like, let's just roll. So gloves off, and we're
Mhm.
just going to start off by addressing, the big elephant in the room here. Then our first segment, we're going to start talking about debunking some of these myths, like the reality of ANC partnerships, because many in the GovCon community hold some misconceptions, some of them positive, some of them negative, about the ease and the benefits of partnering with the ANCs. And I know that you're speaking on behalf of Shenega and you're not speaking on behalf of all ANCs. But in some regards, most ANCs operate, in a similar manner. But Heather, from your experience, what are some of the most common myths and how do you see that they diverge from reality?
Common myth. So most of the things that I hear comes really in regards just to the ability to sole source. And so, you can sole source or ANCs, tribals, or NHOs, they're just easy, streamlined acquisitions. So the easy button for the government. And that I'm just going to be very frank. A lot of people don't truly have the experience of what that process actually looks like in our space. When we hear sole source, that makes it sound like the government, okay, we just went in DSBS, we did our basic research, and you have this NAICS code and a couple contracts. Here, I'm going to call you, the government calls you and say, hey, you get a sole source. That is not how it works at all.
Not like
And
Oprah money? Like,
no,
you
no,
get a contract, you get a contract. Yeah.
not
No?
really. It is not like that at all. At least not in my experience. I mean, so like you said, I'm speaking from my experience and what we go through. And there's really not a whole lot of differences that I hear when I actually get into real conversation with our strategic tribal and NHL partners about how this operates for them. And so typically, the government, like, I'm going to take a moment here and give the government a lot of credit for the due diligence that they actually put behind it. So the concept of it's a sole source, you're not competing, I'd say that's actually a huge misconception because you are competing. It is competed in a very different way. And so it's not competed out on SAM.gov or on a vehicle. However, in the market research process, when the government is seeking their qualified, like really qualified vendors, they don't just bring one company to the table that can do a sole source. They bring many companies to the table that can do a sole source. The larger the opportunity is, the more complex the scope is, the more intense this source select really is. I'll give some examples, and that's very high threshold ones can take a year plus to actually do it. And you are engaged the entire time with this client. You have a team working with them. And I'll walk through that process in more detail because there's nothing bad about it. It's actually an incredible process. I think it's one of the best opportunities for people who do partner with ANCs and why they should partner with them. But you know, typically, well, a couple years ago, you'd see three companies get called to the table. Can you provide a capability brief based off this draft PWS? Or do you have these capabilities? Yes, you go in, you can provide the capability briefing and they may answer, or they may send you read ahead questions, or they'll do questions while they're there, whether they give them to you ahead of time or not. It's something that's totally their own prerogative. And then you're done. That's it. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes it's an hour. We've had one that was like an 8-hour orals with intensity coming behind
Like, no
him.
joke.
No, they're not simple. And so, this leads to like the concept of, oh, it's just easy. You're there. It's not easy. If you go in just saying, we don't approach our customers saying, hi, we can get a sole source. Do you have anything you could sole source us? You're going in with an actual capability. The companies that they're reaching out to have to be able to bring their technical capability, their business support capability, and you're reaping the details. Some of the larger ones we've gotten require essentially proposals to be written. We've done them. Easy example to come in. Before, where you might have seen 3 or 4 companies, now we're seeing like 8 to 12 companies being called in. And it's a voluntary thing. You don't have to respond. So you got to pick and choose what you're going to put your effort into because there's no guarantee. But we've seen them where it's like 22 questions with a 30-page limit just for an initial meeting. And they want them detailed. Every past performance and experience you can reference to demonstrate, how you've done it, contract references, points of contact within the government to qualify yourselves. And then once you do that, there could be another follow on, like an oral down select. Here's 26 more questions that we would like you to answer in this 1 hour meeting we have. Like 1 hour for that, few questions, but they're intense, so you wind up going with a full technical team, which I think also leads to that next myth, right? The next myth I see is that a lot of companies honestly think that there's no technical capability within these, I'll call them super A-Days, because it's not just ANCs. And that's a huge misconception. It's a big myth. If you ever take a look at, I don't have all the data in front of me, and there's lots of free data out there. Get on FPDS, look at USA spending. But you can find the more super A-Days you look at, the the longer they've been around, the more mature they are becoming. You're going to see that the portfolios they have are increasingly not sole source. They have like a hardy amount, but they also have a very healthy amount of competitive 8A and competitive total small business, and in some cases, full and open wins that they're out there. So you don't just get there because you write a great proposal. You have to have a real solutioning behind what you're doing and bona fides. Like you have to be able to walk your walk and talk your talk and bring the people to the table. And so the concept of, you know, that we're just pass-throughs or we're just government puppets, so to say. The government just wants you to come in and do the staffing. It's not accurate. It's really
Yeah.
not accurate. And
I'm really
go ahead.
sorry. I'm really glad that you really kind of spelled that out because it um, substantiated a lot of what my perceptions are and what I espouse is that I do get small businesses that are newly minted 8As and they're like, we want you to come in and help us, get 8A sole source and set
Mm,
asides and stuff. And I was like, I'm not your girl. That's not my world. I don't speak that. It's not, what I find enjoyable and in my world. And eventually they're going to have to get there. And in somewhere else, they have to get there much quicker is that eventually you're going to have to compete. And so really, what I think it does the company an injustice to kind of focus and rest on their laurels, and that you kind of come to the table with, like, we've talked about this before with your handout, that, because I have this, classification that I'm entitled, which is the other word that I hate too, is, being entitled to something, that I'm entitled to this contract, or that I should just assume that, I'll get an easy, I'll skate through and, get something easy, and not have to prove that you're capable or qualified to, provide the solution or whatever it is that, the government needs. So I think that's a really important distinction to kind of make. But you use the term Super 8A, and I know that many of the intellectuals understand what that means, but, can you define or explain what and who is a Super 8A, and what are the, like, what are the benefits that they might have against, like, your random vanilla, 8A or an AMC?
Yeah. So a Super 8A, that's just a term given to Alaska Native corporations, the lower 48 tribal corporations, and Native Hawaiian organizations that are able to have more than one 8A company eligible for the sole sources. We call them Super 8As because uh, you're not restricted. Like the regular restrictions that fall into 8A companies that go through the regular SBA process, which we do. There's no streamlined 8A, processing for our organizations. We're still doing the applications. We're still in the queue going through SBA stuff to get
You
approved.
get behind in line
Right.
with everybody else. Yeah.
Yep, and it's for
No speed pass.
right, there's a first come, first served thing, and we're just waiting, but there are rules that govern how these organizations, are able to leverage NICS codes, their size standard. The SBA does an excellent job at ensuring that all of the compliance rules are followed. So you don't, as example, primary NICS code, only one company in the entire corporation can have it, and then there's a cooling off period for 2 years once that primary NICS is done. So once one company finishes 541, 5.2, guess what? That's a hole for 2 years until another company, can be, brought on with that as a primary NICS. Now, the difference is in it, because we can do sole sources, these organizations have higher threshold per the FAR and the national, defense, the NDA, the National Defense, Act. But the realities is that it's all part of the same market space, the federal government. So, if you're just looking at the 8A space, the goal is 5%. The government doesn't meet that goal. So we're competing in that market space with other normal 8As. But that's really the main difference. The other differences is that organizations that are Super 8s are not offered all of the services that are offered to regular 8As. And so there's additional trainings. There's a lot of things that regular 8As or non-Super 8As can go through to help them, continue to grow. And those are not afforded to Super 8As to do that.